Welcome back to the OurView Podcast. This episode is part of our Mental Health Monday series. These episodes will highlight topics related to mental health. The episodes will sometimes share the stories of those who have been medically diagnosed with mental health disorders, and other episodes in the series will share interviews with mental health professionals who will provide an overview of the different types of mental health diagnoses and their treatment options. These episodes are intended to be informational and educational only. It is not medical advice, and any information within these episodes is not intended to diagnose. We encourage you to always seek the guidance of your medical physician or clinician for any decisions regarding your medical needs and conditions. On this episode, I welcome my guest, Dr. Carlene MacMillan. She is an adult and child psychiatrist at Brooklyn Minds. We discuss how she has used the social media platform Clubhouse to bring awareness to mental health diagnoses. I would like to welcome everyone back to another episode of the OurView Podcast, where we aim to educate, raise awareness, and change the tone of conversation about disabilities. This episode is part of our Mental Health Mondays series, and I'm very happy to welcome my guest today, Dr. Carlene MacMillan, to the podcast. So, Carlene, welcome to the podcast, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. And you are part of the Brooklyn Minds team there. And Dr. Owen Muir was a guest on our podcast for 2 episodes earlier this year. And
Two, wow, yeah.
yes,
Very
yes.
good.
Yeah, and he was kind enough to reach out to his colleagues there and, for you all to come on the podcast and speak about your area of interest and expertise in the mental health field. So I'm very happy to have you on the podcast today.
I'm happy to be on. Yeah, and he's more than a colleague. He's my husband. So we're business partners
Really?
and life partners. Yes.
I never
Yes.
knew that.
Yes.
Wow. So you learn something every day.
Yeah, yeah. Not
Wow.
everyone realizes that. I kind of just assume they do, but then many people do not.
No,
So,
I didn't know that. Wow, that's cool.
yeah.
So, so our conversation today, as I said, is part of our Mental Health Monday series, and that's something that I started here on the podcast to raise awareness about mental health diagnoses and how they have uh, had an impact on, society, especially in the last year and a half of us all dealing with the pandemic and being isolated from our friends and family and just not being able to socialize with people in our typical in-person way for what seems like such a very long time now.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
so I would love to get into this conversation by just asking you to tell us who you are. Who is Dr. Carlene MacMillan?
Sure. So I am an adult and child psychiatrist. I trained up in Boston at Harvard and then stayed at the Mass General McLean system from basically medical school through my first job. And when I was at McLean, I really worked a lot with people with more severe mental illness, people with personality disorders, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, people were really needing kind of more specialized help in that hospital setting. McLean is one of the, if not the best, psychiatric hospital in the country, or some would even say the world. So it was a really good training ground, really good mentorship there. And then I relocated to New York, I guess almost 7 years ago now. Wow, time goes by fast. To basically start my own practice. I was briefly at NYU, but went out on my own and formed Brooklyn Minds with my husband. It started off just the two of us, and now we have around 80 employees, about 30 of whom are clinicians of various different specialties. And we really have a team-based approach to helping folks for whom help has traditionally not been particularly helpful. So we tend to deal with people who've been in and out of hospitals, in and out of emergency rooms, treaters have declined to work with them, people that really have severe psychiatric illness, and we see a lot of them getting a lot better with the right treatment by the right team. So the work is in the outpatient setting and is very, very rewarding. So that's kind of my day job, has been building that practice. And then in my copious spare time, which has become more part of my life now, is being more public facing and teaching the general public about mental illness. And I do that through two main channels. The first is through something called the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. That's the professional organization for us child psychiatrists. I'm the co-chair of their Consumer Issues Committee, where we develop all kinds of materials for families and young people about everything from ADHD to gender identity, anxiety around climate change, you name it. We probably have a Facts for Families on it. And then the other thing that I do is I'm very active on Clubhouse, which is a new social audio platform. I think of it like a live call-in radio meets podcast meets academic panel, where we can go on and do a show, Ask Me Anything about bipolar disorder, and people from literally all over the world will come and ask us questions. And of course, we're not giving treatment advice, but there's a ton of general information that we can give, and really reduce stigma and tackle a number of the myths that people have about mental illness. So very passionate about doing that. It really I think is informed by the work I do clinically, but now being able to share it on a much wider scale, I think is really important.
That's great. And,
Mhm.
we're getting into both of those things in this conversation. So I'm really excited to hear more about the work that you're doing on Clubhouse. That's actually where I met Owen
Oh,
through,
good.
yeah,
Oh,
through
cool.
Clubhouse.
Yeah. See, it's
So
magical. All kinds
it
of
is.
connections.
It is. It has really brought so many, it's made so many connections for me for this podcast. They have a very large disability community on Clubhouse, and they also have a very
They
large
do.
mental health community on Clubhouse. And
Mhm.
it's been great to just share in different conversations with people on any topic you can think of. There's most likely a room on Clubhouse for it. And
Exactly. From Bravo TV to, as you said, to disability, accessibility, everything in between. Yep.
right, yeah, there's just so many different rooms that you can go into and talk about whatever you
Mhm.
want. And it's been a very for me it's I've found it to be a very safe space for me to share parts of my story with complete strangers.
Mhm.
But there's
Isn't it
something.
funny how it's more comfortable
It
to
is.
share sometimes, especially with a no video too? It's audio
Yes.
only.
And I was just going to say that I think it has a lot to do with the audio, the voice piece. Just hearing somebody's voice, and it's just like, okay, sure, I'll share every part of my life with you, and all of the things that I
Yep.
didn't know were bothering me. I'll just share it here on this platform with you all who I've never met. Um,
Hmm.
so so yes, I'm very happy to hear that you're doing such great work on Clubhouse. But before we get into that, I would love to hear more about what the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry is, and you said you're the co-chair of their Consumer Issues Committee. So I would love to
Hmm.
hear, what that is, and a little bit more about the work that you do there and why it is so important.
Sure. So yeah, I've been involved with ACAP. I think when I was even in medical school, I went to a conference, and they have really strong mentorship program for people that are kind of going into the field. We have a massive shortage of child psychiatrists in the country and internationally. So it's sort of so important to find those new, young, excited, passionate minds. And I got involved at the committee level during my child fellowship. I knew I wanted to be involved in the organization and meet people. And the Consumer Issues Committee had an opening for a trainee. And it was a really exciting committee because they produce all the materials on the website. It gets massive reach, millions of views, people searching. So a parent might be searching for autism, they might be searching for bedwetting, whatever it is, ACAP stuff will really come to the top, and it's meant to be at the seventh grade reading level. It's also being translated into multiple languages. It's something that really a wide range of people hopefully can read it and get something actionable from it, because there's so much sort of garbage information on the internet. There's so much, well, I saw it on Reddit, or I saw it on some parenting forum, but it's totally bogus. So we really try to keep the information up to date. We periodically review it, keep it pretty non-controversial, right? It's not a place for me to share my opinions. It's really about to share the state of the field. And so we were part of this committee, and over time ended up becoming the co-chair. Right, it's a committee that people stay on for many years if they get really invested in it, and it's been a great source of mentorship, networking, connection with psychiatrists kind of across the country, as well as just different stages of their careers, people just starting out to people who've retired. And I love those meetings. And I think, for anybody who has a professional organization that they could associate with, I would encourage them to really look into doing so, because it can really just deepen, widen your perspective. And I know what's going on the ground of New York, but now I also know what's going on in Colorado, and like I know what's going on even in, the UK. Like people coming together in this way is just so powerful. And so I really enjoy that work. I've always enjoyed writing. I don't like writing articles, like academic articles. My husband's always like getting on me, like, you have this paper, you got to finish. I do not like doing that type of writing. It's so important, but it's just not where I excel. And I find that people are either really good at that scientific technical writing or that general public writing. And
Mm.
I've always really gravitated towards the general public, which is, I think, why I like a platform like Clubhouse as well, and Twitter, and just being able to take complex topics, put them in some form that the average person, I always think, like, if I say this to my mother, well, she's a retired school teacher, and a smart person, but doesn't have a real academic background. Like, is my mom going to understand this thing? If not, then we have to keep working until it's something that she can understand.
Yeah, I think that is so important to,
Hmm.
uh, share the information, share accurate information, number one,
Hmm.
and then to share it in such a way that is easily understood by someone who, has little or no knowledge of a particular topic. Uh, just because it's like, what good does it do if people aren't able to understand it? If you're sharing all this great information, but it's in written or shared in such a way that it's, above their heads, it's not, it's not being beneficial to many or any.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
so it's really, yeah, so that's really really great. And so now back to the one of the great inventions of 2020, Clubhouse.
Yeah.
I again, like, I found such a great space there. And and a lot of my guests for this year on the podcast so far have been connections I've made on through Clubhouse. And can you share with us um, the work you're doing there on Clubhouse, and the mission that you have of sharing topics related to mental health and information about mental health on that platform?
Sure. Yeah, we got on it like pretty early in the fall of last year. And I don't even remember, like, I think the first something someone told me was like, "Oh, you might meet some investors on there. There's a lot of Silicon Valley people on there. You should go on there and network," right? And when I went on there at first, um, I think I was really one of the, like, there was maybe like two or three psychiatrists on there. It was like early days. I think there was like 10,000 users, and now they have tens of millions of users.
Right.
Um, and we just started doing kind of like ask me anything rooms, myself, my husband, some of our other therapist colleagues. And there was this huge demand. We did a room, I remember early on borderline personality disorder, and at any given moment there was like 1,000 people in the room, right? And these were just, and it was like really easy for us because it was sharing from, it was the evening, it was after work, we could share information that we were used to sharing anyways. And people were really appreciative, so we just started doing more and more of that, meeting more people who were sort of similarly able to do that. And we kind of figured out pretty early on that there were more and more doctors on there and more psychiatrists, therapists, but a lot of them really were ivory tower-ish, or they said, there's us, the doctors, and there's them, the patients, and there's, we know best. And I think we formed a club called Sphere, which we say is the shape of what's next in mental health. And we really wanted it to be inclusive. And it's the sphere. And so when we would do rooms, we would be really inclusive of having people who have lived experience. Sometimes that might be the psychiatrist on the panel, right? My husband has bipolar, he talks about it openly, but we wouldn't just have people speaking at the audience. We'd have people who were, people who had been involuntarily hospitalized, people who had been on lithium, people who have really lived these experiences, contributing to the conversation in a way that I think what it wasn't the norm, maybe still isn't the norm, right? I think there's a lot of doctor rooms on there, and then there's a lot of rooms that are just patients and stuff, just people, and those rooms can be problematic too, right? Because then you can have people who really don't have that professional training, and someone starts telling something traumatic, and the moderator doesn't really know what to do with that. So I really like these blended rooms that have a mix of professionals, mix of people with the experiences, and I think that really resonated with people. And so in early spring, Clubhouse announced they were going to be doing an accelerator called the Creator First program, where they were going to select a number of shows to basically be incubated, to be promoted, and get really the full support of Clubhouse for several months. I applied for this frontier psychiatrist concept because I figured, when we're on the frontiers of social audio, and also on the frontiers of what's new in the mental health field, in our day-to-day practice. And sure enough, it was selected as one of the things. I think they had 5,000 applicants, and ultimately 25 shows were selected. Ours was amongst
Wow.
that. So yeah, so for the past several months, we've been doing a weekly show called New Frontiers, as well as our Ask Me Anything show. And we've been doing programming that's really general audience oriented, but has a mental health tie-in. So we did something about how people on TikTok and YouTube were saying they had dissociative identity disorder or Tourette's or other types of things, where it seemed like many of them probably don't actually have that, and they're doing it just because that's what the algorithms are liking. And very interesting discussion, all the way to having Carol Baskin from Tiger King talking about, why people love exotic pets on the internet, and what can we do to change behavior around that, right? So it's been kind of a wild ride. It's been interesting to meet people and kind of continuing to do programming like that. That we did a whole thing on Free Britney, because that subject with Britney Spears really touched on a lot of issues that are near and dear to my heart around autonomy and mental illness, and people being able to get help that helps versus help that's not helpful. So it's been really great to have that platform, and it's led to meeting new colleagues. We've hired a couple people from the platform professionally, met new, lifelong friends. It's been really cool. So definitely
That's
encourage people to
great.
check it out. It's not just Silicon Valley investors anymore, that's for sure.
Right. I really appreciate what you're doing there, as you said, having the combined rooms with the medical professionals, and then also those who have the lived experiences, and as you mentioned, including some of the doctors who have the lived experience of having the diagnosis as well, um,
Hmm.
because it does take away from that. Oh, we're the doctors. We know best, as you said, or we're the
Yes.
only answers, and we have all the answers kind of situation, where it really provides a conversation between the medical professionals and the patients, and it really I think that's so I think that's such a great way to share information and to help educate people, because you do have
Hmm.
the true lived experiences of what certain people deal with, and they experience with their diagnosis. And it's it's like, for me, living with spina bifida, every person that has a spina bifida diagnosis is different. They have different things that hurt them, and their pain, and different levels and abilities of mobility. So I walk
Mhm.
with leg braces and crutches, but I also use a wheelchair. There are some people with spina bifida who cannot walk with leg braces. So it really does provide an opportunity in your case with just using bipolar disorder as a diagnosis. You can hear what one person's story is and how someone else who has a bipolar diagnosis has a completely different experience, and both are
Right.
valid, both are real, both are worth being acknowledged. And I just love that you use that approach rather than the, hey, we're just going to have a panel filled with with doctors to share all this information and not have a chance to hear from anyone else who may be living with that diagnosis.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like if you've met one person with bipolar disorder, you've met one person with bipolar disorder, right? Yeah. So
Yes.
that's we try to really keep that in mind. And I think we're known for having, I think, pretty nuanced, respectful conversations and handling people who, maybe we've had people come up who are just downright hostile, really anti-psychiatry, really, and oftentimes we agree with a lot of what they're saying, right? It's just we have some slightly different take about what can be done about it, or maybe why it happened the way it is. But usually, criticism is based in some kind of valid problem within the field or limitation within our with the system as a whole.
Yes, that is it again, it's just great work that you all are doing there on Clubhouse, and uh the potential to reach so many people through that one app. As you said, it started off with just iPhone users and a couple thousand people
Mm-hmm.
as members, and you had to. I don't know if they still have the invitation system where
They
you can.
don't.
Okay.
It's open for everybody, out of
Yes.
beta.
Right. So at first it was an invitation only. You had to be invited by somebody, and then as you spent more time on the app, you got more invitations to send out to people. So,
Yep.
but now it's open to everybody, so that's even better. And
Mm-hmm.
can you share with us where people can find you on Clubhouse, and if they're interested in um, being a part of one of your rooms, like when do you host the rooms there?
Absolutely, yeah. So my handle on there is at psychiatrist, which is very easy. And the benefits of if you ever get onto a social media platform earlier, get those names straight away. So yeah, I'm at psychiatrist, and then we have a website. It's asksphere.club, and asksphere.club is really our home where we list our upcoming shows. We have a list to our blog that has recaps of shows and some audio clips. And so that really should be the starting point. If you go there, you can sign up and you'll get either a text or an email before our shows are starting. And then once you're on the platform, join the Sphere Club, follow me. You'll get, you'll get good content that way.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
That is thank you for sharing that information with our listeners here. Okay, so for our last question for this conversation, um, mental health diagnosis, they are considered to be invisible disabilities. Yes, uh, they are considered disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that is something I always like to stress because a lot of people um, forget that or they are unaware of that.
Hmm.
So, mental health diagnoses are considered invisible disabilities. Why is it important for someone who has a mental health diagnosis like ADHD or bipolar disorder to ask for appropriate accommodations?
Mm. Yeah, this is a huge issue. So I think that because the accommodations can make a major difference. So with ADHD, we're looking at things like extra time and taking testing in different environments that aren't as distracting. And with bipolar disorder, we're oftentimes looking at accommodations around work schedules, around things like night shifts, things that really can be really problematic for someone with bipolar disorder. As long as the role, like, if you sign up for a job that's just only night shifts, like that's going to be difficult to accommodate. But if you're in a situation where you have we have some flexibility, then it's great to let somebody know and ask for those accommodations, to not work to not work nights makes a huge difference. Or even thinking about travel, like traveling across a bunch of time zones, right? If there is ability to do a meeting by Zoom, then
Mhm.
that will be more helpful than traveling to California from, New York, if it can be. With ADHD accommodations, I think it's tricky. Some places have really unnecessarily draconian requirements around that. They are asking for specific neuropsych testing. There is no definitive neuropsych testing for ADHD. It is a clinical diagnosis. So, well, it's important to have documentation from a clinician, and there are some rating scales. To spend several $1,000s on advanced neuropsych testing for a simple ADHD diagnosis is unfortunately not it doesn't make sense clinically. Some schools and things do require that, and it is a real barrier. We try to educate wherever we can around that, but sometimes it's unavoidable. But most doctors are able to provide enough documentation to get, say, extra time on people, going to law school, taking tests for medical school, taking GREs, things like that. It's really important to ask for, and particularly if somebody had accommodations in high school and elementary school, when they're going to college, to be sure to plan in advance with the college around those accommodations. And if there's going to be any standardized tests, to plan as far in advance as you can to get all the ducks in the row, paperwork wise.
Yes, it is. It's so important to start early with
Yes.
planning for all of that. Yes, because it can take time. You are entitled to those accommodations, and everyone might not be approved right away, but just through having the conversations and working through some things and talking out, uh, what it is that you need, it is they can the accommodations can be made, and it is important to start early. Don't wait until the last minute. um
Mhm.
because that's never a good thing with anything, but
Right. Which is often ironic given people with ADHD sometimes do procrastinate as a part of the thing, and it can be overwhelming. And so, I recommend too, like people just bringing the paperwork to the sessions with their clinicians and like literally just doing it during the session, like use the
mhm,
session time, get it done, do it with somebody. Because otherwise it will just sort of sit in a pile on the desk and not, or you need a printer and you don't know where a printer is, and all these sort of things that can kind of get in the way. Like, don't let that be the reason.
right. Well, Carlene, I had a great time with this conversation, and I'm very
Nice.
excited for everyone to hear this conversation. So I thank you for your time, and just for providing um, all of your knowledge about this topic, and just again to keep raising awareness about mental health. And um, it's so important because, as I said when I started, we've all been through some things, especially in this last year and a half. And
Oh, yes. Been through
yes,
some things.
yes, we've
Yes.
been through some things. But
Yes.
it is it's through conversations like this though where I feel uh, they can be very beneficial to people, for people who are listening, and uh, just provide that that little push that they may need to reach out to someone because they're experiencing some type of some type of issues, and they have some concerns about the way they are feeling as far as their mental health is concerned. So thank you for this conversation.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with me today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and thank you
Yeah.
for all you do to spread awareness around this.
Well, thank you so much, and you have a great day.
You too.
All right,
Bye.
bye.